We all have the skill to manage multiple relationships. How many friends do you have?
Monogamy is a cult.
This is going to be kitchen table polyamory. We're all going to feel really good and we're going to love each other. It's a little aggressive.
What do you need to have a secure attachment?
I just don't want to have a fight after this event.
Hey, is everyone still feeling good tonight?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
And we are Decolonizing Love. My name is Millie.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to the show. And this episode is sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer, but more on that later.
Many challenges can come up when you're exploring ethical non-monogamy, so we decided to dedicate a whole episode to it. We're diving into the common challenges polyamorous people face, tackling real audience questions with expert advice. Then we shift the lens to explore the unique experiences of BIPOC individuals in non-monogamy and unpack the powerful idea of decolonizing love. Whether you're poly, curious, or just love deep conversations around relationships, this episode has something for you.
And today's guests, we have Millie and Nick, who you may know as Decolonizing Love on social media. The duo are polyamorous educators and coaches helping individuals navigate their non-monogamous relationships while decolonizing their love praxis. Millie is an artivist, immigrant, and has been polyamorous their entire life. From womb. Nick is a personal coach and activist and has been polyamorous for 14 years. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So the place that we really want to start is chatting about poly problems. And one disclaimer I want to give for our audience is that this episode is mainly for folks who are already exploring polyamory, already doing ethical non-monogamy. But we have 2 prior episodes that we did with Yaz the Human where you can explore the basics and get an intro. The first place I want to start, for many, one of the scariest parts about ethical non-monogamy is the perceived lack of stability. How can you come to terms with the constant change that's out of your control and find comfort in new ways?
The first question is how we perceive stability. I think this comes from the notion that when we think about that, you know, if we're opening up a relationship, we're going to destabilize us. There's going to be this lack of stability. Maybe to roll it back, like, where does this notion of stability and monogamy come from? A lot of times in our coaching sessions, we talk about limiting beliefs. This is not our concept. This is a concept that I know that Jessica Fern has talked about, the author of Polysecure and Polywise. When we attach certain assumptions to kind of like statements or something like that, then that causes our bodies to get activated in a certain way. And so if we're associating stability with monogamy or stability with one partner, then the moment we open up, that causes us to have anxiety or anything. And then we think that's destabilizing.
On that note of non-monogamy, polyamory, being unstable, I would also go around what does stability mean? So for me, stability also does mean emotional security, and emotional security is also things such as honesty. So people may look at non-monogamy as unstable, but we do have these aspects that are in a way better than inside compulsory monogamy culture. Compulsory monogamy culture doesn't really have a culture of radical honesty as part of its relationship praxis. It has a lot of control avenues, so you can't really be entirely yourself. So there's a lot of inauthenticity. Whilst I feel with non-monogamy and polyamory, I know that the door is always wide open. You can be whoever you want to be, and you can communicate, and we're here. And that creates a different form of security and stability where there's always authenticity and direct communication. I think a lot of people sometimes think non-monogamy and polyamory is unstable because of the fact they're like, it's just dating so many people, there's always so much movement, etc. You know, it's this idea of chaos and everything. And I'm like, actually, if you look at the numbers, polyamorous people actually have less sexual partners.
Really?
Because, and here's why.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why, okay, for also another statistic is that our relationships are longer on average. Non-monogamous relationships are longer on average because of the good communication skills.
Yeah.
Cheating is a very big reason why people end up like breaking up inside in a monogamous relationship. That factor is removed with non-monogamy, right? And you have good communication skills, so your relationships are going to last longer. Most polyamorous people do not have time for more than 2 or 3 relationships.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to do. So we're actually kind of rather stable, and we have our stability around things like boundaries, agreements that we really love to do. Somebody called us Sheldon the other day from Big Bang Theory. That was hilarious. So these things create, I think, in a way, more security and less discombobulation.
Children that are raised in environments that are polyamorous they're actually more stable because they have more parental figures, more adults to guide them, versus in a nuclear family setup, you have two people that are probably working in this economy, struggling, barely have time for their kids, and so their kids don't have many parental figures. But when you have more people in the mix, more safe people in the mix, then it leads to a lot more stability for these particular children.
Yeah. Also more income for this kid or children.
More presents at their birthday.
Yeah. There you go.
Monogamy in this economy?
You can't. We opened up our relationship like about a year ago now. So I'd say like this is probably the most unstable part of polyamory when you're like newly exploring it. There's like a lot of change happening. I think hearing what you're saying, it definitely brings a lot of like hope of where it gets to, I guess, and the level of stability you can find. I used to be the kind of person that found a lot of stability in having a long-term romantic partner, and it was like weird, look at me in the eyes, we're living on this life together, you and me, we're making all of our decisions together, that kind of thing. And it's like, I think it is a kind of control, it's true, and you let go of that control, and I started to feel very out of control, I guess. But what I had to do was figure out how to find stability within myself, if that makes sense, and just like feel comfortable by myself no matter what happens.
I mean, we all have the skill to manage multiple relationships. We do that outside of romantic setting, right? How many friends do you have? You have a lot of friends. Many.
So popular over here.
You have a lot of friends. You have family members. You manage multiple relationships differently. Where we in a compulsory monogamy culture lack the skill is managing multiple romantic settings. But those are transferable skills. And because this is a new territory for you, like any other skill at the beginning, we're going to feel like a little chaotic at first and stuff like that. You know, it's this muscle that you're building a little bit more. And once you gain that skill and you realize, oh, like I do it with everything else, and you apply that to romantic relationships, that's where the stability comes from.
I would say that monogamy is a lot like a script. And so you're used to this script. You've been taught this script your entire life about how it progresses in your culture, your family, the media. And it goes like, you meet cute person, you flirt, you go on a date, you fall in love. It's called the relationship escalator. So it progresses, and with every step, your relationship becomes more serious and more respected, you know, until you hit the top of the escalator. So next one, you cohabitate, you marry, you have children, right? You live in this legacy. You are the pinnacle of monogamy now, right?
And you're a success in society's eyes,
right? And the more you hit this escalator, the better, right? This script you've been given your entire life. Non-monogamy and polyamory is like improvised acting. You no longer have a script. And it's scary, right? For a lot of people who improvise acting. What do you mean? How do I create now this story? The better you do improvise acting, the more you're able to get that and create a narrative that's your own. And that's a little bit like polyamory. I had a client once who came from a very strict Mormon church. And she was like, I know it's a cult, but it was something that I could know what was happening tomorrow and what I had to do. And I sometimes miss being told what to do.
Yeah.
And that's understandable.
I mean, that's why a lot of people like being submissive.
Exactly. You want to let go of the control. It's hard. It's hard. You want to know, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's the reason why fascists and dictators, especially in times of chaos, really do well, because people want order. Monogamy is a cult. This idea of the one will fulfill you and, you know, fulfill every hole. So now when you have to just, you know, actually deal with your wounds and also make your own story, right? A lot of people are like, oh, this is too much. I'm done crying. I don't want to deal with this anymore.
I saw this stat where it's like religious people tend to be, sadly, happier than atheists.
Right.
Because it just gives you the sense of like someone's looking out for me. You know what I mean?
Oh, God.
Actually, I read a study,
Yeah.
a similar study, and the reason why they were happier was because they congregated every week. And so it was the essence of community that allowed for happiness. And non-religious people don't have that similar level of community.
We don't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
We're just really angry in our living rooms.
Yeah. It's magical thinking, right? It's this person who will take care of everything.
You are expecting to be this one person to be your everything,
Yeah.
like to give you everything that you desire, to have the same goals as you, probably, like depending on how, strict you are with monogamy. And it is true that there's a lot of infidelity in monogamous relationships. There's also a lot of divorce when it comes to, and divorce, I mean, marriage can happen also in polyamorous relationships as well. So that's not like a one size fits all. But a lot of marriages do happen in monogamy, and there's a high divorce rate as well, and there's a lot of lack of communication, and that's somehow normalized as well. The fact that between spouses or just between your long-term partner, long-term monogamous partner, it is very common to see secrets being kept or just not being totally honest with somebody, and a lot of the times that person expects you to not think about anybody else, not look at anybody else, not compliment anybody else. Anything that anybody says to you is like, sorry, I have a partner. And that's not very realistic. Even just like if you are somebody that does nothing about it by nature, it's unrealistic to think that you didn't think something. You know what I mean? Like you didn't have some sort of feeling or desire at some point for somebody that is outside of your partner.
Yeah.
I know that polyamory for a lot of people can trigger complex PTSD. So I'm wondering, how can somebody experiencing this manage that?
I had CPTSD, and over like a lot of therapy, I've gone to just PTSD. CPTSD manifests for people so widely different. What kind of CPTSD are we talking about here? Because it might trigger in somebody like extreme jealousy, extreme insecurities, things around self-esteem might come up, right? Ways that they've been abused and that led to that might come up. For somebody else, though, let's say, for example, they came from a very controlling place and they came from a place where they were forced to be monogamous. Let's say somebody was forced to be in a marriage, right? And they had an abusive husband who, every time they saw somebody, they would get beaten up. So for them, when they're becoming polyamorous, they're like, I don't want any control. I want to be able to do whatever I want, right? So for them is that they want as little boundaries, while somebody else might be, I need more boundaries. So it's so much depends on the kind of CPTSD you have, the kind of trauma that you have, what kind of securities that you're going to need to be able to deal with that. I always say is that I think it's great that polyamory forces you to go uncover some of these inner child wounds and demons and relationship woundings that have happened, because monogamy is so often something that you can just sweep your issues under, right? But in a way, there will always be there. And we tend to just recreate a lot of our familial relationship, patterns until it's finally like you actually deal with it. Polyamory just makes you get there faster.
100%.
And you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it.
You can't hide.
It's right in your
Can't
face.
hide it.
Yeah.
It's there. It'll come up somehow. Yeah. And the answer, I think, is always is a lot of shadow work, a lot of patience, giving yourself grace. CPTSD takes time to actually work through. Took me years. I grew up in different countries, and when I was 3 years old, my family moved to Israel and Palestine, and I was there during the first Gulf War. Saddam Hussein was throwing bombs into Israel to try to entice them into war. My family lived near the area where we were being bombed. I would wake up screaming from the bombings every single night, and then we had to be evacuated. And so I had to be taken to boarding school at the age of 5. By myself, the only person in boarding school. So that's when my CPTSD starts, waking up, thinking there's a bomb, there's no bomb, but now I have no family.
Wow.
It took me years to get through that. Having a partner, who every morning tells me it's okay and giving me security. Now with polyamory, it can be what happens when your partner is not around. He can text you, hey, by the way, are you okay? Right? There's still ways, so I say when you have CPTSD, ask, your partners to be like, when you're triggered, what do you need? And it helps you create that sort of security.
How do you get to a place where you know what you need? I personally have a problem with that, PTSD or even CPTSD, which I have experienced heavily. I don't know that I'm experiencing it until much later. It could be months down the road. I'm trying to shorten that time frame now. I'm not even realizing that it's happening until later when I'm reflecting on it. But I'm just acting different. I'm acting not myself. I'm acting strange or bothered or generally angry, perhaps. It can come up differently for me. So to even identify that it's happening is a challenge. But now that I've started to begin to identify it a little bit better, it's still a huge challenge for me to be like, this is what I need. Sometimes I don't know what I need. I'm just like, well, this is how I feel, and I'm not really sure what to do about it.
I think somatic therapy will really help you with understanding where it is and what you need. If you've had CPTSD and you've had it lifelong, you've always lived like that, so you don't know any other way, you know? If you're wanting to understand it, therapy definitely really helps with helping you sort of go through questions of where different feelings sit in your body, so you get a much more brain-body understanding. So if I say the word grief right now, where do you feel it?
Stomach.
All right, so you're pretty good. Keep on going, I think, with different words that might trigger you and where it sits in your body. And I also would say journaling.
I'm bad at that too.
Okay.
That's actually the best way to note trends or anything. And if you're bad with the old school analog journaling, like just writing things down, there are apps that help.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that. So if you're a person who's already good at feeling, then I guess you're the other side where you're like, you don't understand mind-wise where how all these things are fitting in together, then yes, journaling is your answer.
Okay.
You're like the opposite of what most people are. They underfeel and overthink. You're like the opposite. We know the pattern. So it means you gotta...
I feel a lot. I just don't know what to do about it.
So you just need more of a better mind-body connection and sort of strengthen the mind part, which is, the journaling.
Okay. Journaling.
The next piece that we wanted to get into was talking about managing imbalances between your different relationships. When the balance of time or attention feels uneven in polyamorous relationships, of course, this is usually your partner is telling you this, how can you restore a sense of equity?
Know what you want in terms of time, and what you want should always be tried to be met in your relationship. Otherwise, you might not be compatible. So often in polyamory, people think, I should just accept the fact it's polyamory. I should just be happy with 2 days or 3 days or whatever day. I'm like, no, what do you need to have a secure attachment? Honestly, even in monogamy, you should be thinking about not just go with the default, you're with them 24/7, because do you really need them 24/7? What do you need for a secure attachment-based relationship? For me, it's 3 days a week. That's what I need. And then you go with your partner and you tell them, this is what I need. And, let's say they have 2-3 partners, and one of the party needs 2 days and another party needs 5 days. Negotiate, see how you can do it all together, meet everybody's needs, and that's how you meet equity. And it could be your partner may realize is that they can't meet all their partners' like secure attachment needs. Then guess what? Maybe that you can't have that many partners. You can't handle it. Be with partners who you can actually meet their secure attachment needs, and you should never compromise and basically like settle for less than that.
It's just about finding the people that fit the best in our lives, given our commitments, our hobbies, it's the things we do in a monogamous setting. If I was super busy, I was working 80 hours a week and I had barely any time for a partner, just in a monogamous setting, like I would not match with a partner that wanted me to be at home every evening and everything. So, this is just the same thing. It's just different reasons why we would be busy.
For me, feeling like there was potentially inequity, even when things maybe were balanced, I think it was feeling like maybe my needs aren't met, or even just like the sense of jealousy as well of like, oh, like I kind of have like FOMO, like I would want to be on that date specifically, even though it's like, well, we just had a special date. What would your advice be for someone on the other side of it navigating those feelings of jealousy?
I know, Carbon, you mentioned a little bit about, like when we're jealous, we tell the other person, don't see that person or don't do this and everything. It's when we feel activated, we're kind of spiraling. And so we need to regain some control. And the easiest way to regain control is to control the other person. That might be the source of our negative feelings or whatever. And so this is how, kind of like our default in a monogamous relationship, we would deal with jealousy. What non-monogamy forces us to do is, like we talk about, instead of rules or instead of control, where does this come from? Let's manage this. Let's look at jealousy less like an alarm that something's bad in our relationship and more like a feeling, an emotion, like anger, like anything. And it signals something, but it's not necessarily as devastating as we would like it to be. It signals that there's some either insecurity or some fear that we're feeling, limiting beliefs on how we're perceiving a certain behavior that our partner is doing that we feel might be because they're either checked out, because they want to leave the relationship, they're going to break up with us, they're going to replace us. So all these fears come up. How do we manage jealous feelings? The first thing we usually say is just call it out. With our partners. Say, I'm feeling angry right now. If I'm feeling jealous, I'm feeling jealous. If I'm feeling sad, I feel sad. Let our partner know right away. The emotion just goes down by at least half just by calling it out. And then it's about digging down about why am I feeling this? What was the trigger? There's a great book that we recommend constantly. We're always recommending this book. It's called The Jealousy Workbook. It's a green book by Kathy Labriola. In the workbook, there's this chapter. It goes through about 50 exercises. There's this one exercise. It's this visualization exercise where one of the partners closes their eyes and then the other partner reads to them a scenario. The objective there is to figure out at what point in that scenario do you start feeling queasy, you start feeling bad, you start feeling jealous feelings. Is it at the point where we're visualizing our partner go on a date? Is it the part where they're having their kiss? Is it the part where there's some sort of genital touching? And so then you know where your trigger is. And so it's just with this greater awareness, the power that jealousy has on us slowly diminishes. And to your question about FOMO, what happens if I really want to go to that and everything? It's about figuring out why, if you want to go all together or just kind of like alternating for like different things. Rock, paper, scissors is a really good
like
let's
be mature,
decider.
Everyone. Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah,
please.
totally.
That's how we handle disputes. A lot of it. Why did you feel FOMO?
We were very much like attached at the hip before, and it was like
Siamese twins.
Yeah, it wasn't Emily and Carbon, it was Em and Carbon. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone always saw us together, and it was feeling like I was seeing someone start to like replace me in that way.
Okay.
Or it was like, oh, that's what we normally do together, you know, that kind of feeling. Or it's like, even when you see your partner, maybe they like watch a show together that you like watching. I think I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race with Brock, and like that started making you uncomfortable, even though you were like, I don't even like it that much. But you know, it's like
I was like, but you always ask me.
Yeah, so it starts to feel like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it's the replacement is really the underlying feeling. It's not really the FOMO. It's that feeling of replacement, and it's about tackling that feeling and trying to create security and, you know, working as to how can I make you reassure you that you're not going to be replaced. And after that, it's just a matter of time, you know, because you're only been 1 year open.
True.
So it's going to take a while before you create like security around that. You know, you need some more predictability. Your nervous system needs to have more evidence that you're secure.
True.
Nervous system was shocked. Absolutely shocked. I have a heavy flow, and it's actually super annoying when I go to bed with a tampon in or a Diva cup and I wake up to a bloody mess because it's leaked everywhere. Now, period underwear like Isle has actually been such a huge game changer for me because now I can get a restful sleep and wake up without any mess.
Today's episode is brought to you by Isle, the original period underwear company. Proudly queer-owned, Isle has been leading the way in sustainable period care since 1993, redefining what period products can do for you and the planet for nearly 3 decades.
Let's talk about their Boost Boxer. Now, this is a period underwear like you've never experienced before. The Boost Boxer is a reliable, comfortable, and inclusive style option for everybody. Yes, everybody. Whether you're on the go, working from home, or looking for overnight protection that you can count on, this boxer brief is designed to move with you.
So what makes it so special, you might ask? First, it's made with sustainable fabrics that are breathable and leak-proof, so you stay comfortable and dry all day long. It's made for the heaviest of flows. The leak-proof gusset is sewn from the front of the waistband all the way to the back, while the removable Boost liner lets you customize your absorbency level, giving you extra protection when you need it most. And unlike some other reusable period products, the Boost Boxer is PFAS free and designed to keep you feeling fresh with no leaks.
And as if the underwear wasn't good enough, another reason why we love Isle so much is because they are a certified B Corp. That means that they're held to some of the highest standards for social and environmental responsibility. It's period care that you can feel good about, literally and figuratively.
So why settle for less when you can have it all? Inclusive styles, comfort, sustainability, and performance. Head to periodisle.com and use code QueerCollective for 15% off. Isle, sustainable period products for every body.
Thank you, Isle, for sponsoring this episode.
One thing I also wanted to ask in the terms of like balancing attention with people too, I think given the scripts that we're all faced or given in terms of like you're supposed to have one partner, I think one thing that has come up a lot for us is feeling a bit strange in social situations when we're all together as a group. And I guess like getting in your head about the amount of attention that's given to certain people and feeling like maybe you're not getting enough attention. And then on the other hand, you feeling like a bit, I feel like you just get a bit awkward sometimes too.
Yeah.
Just of like,
Instantly,
I don't know how to
yeah.
act. Like
I'm
it's,
like, oh.
I've lost my script.
How do I act natural?
All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, what do I do with my hands?
yeah. So when you have a script, you don't need to think about it.
Yeah.
You just go in and that's it. You just know what the protocol is.
Yeah, the script was, this is my partner,
Yeah.
that's it.
These
That's
are where
it.
my hands go.
Yeah.
When you don't have a script, what needs to happen first?
Oof.
You write a script?
Yes, you write a script. So you write a script and that, yes, exactly. And so how do we write a script? Obviously, this is all an analogy. So how do you write a script in a scenario where you know you're all going to be together to make it less awkward? How are you going to create predictability?
Well, I guess you would have to discuss that with your cast.
Exactly. Discuss it with your cast.
Yeah.
We have actually a video that we posted years ago. Actually, it was probably near the beginning about, you know, like what to do when you're introducing new partner to your other partner and everything. Have a discussion with each partner beforehand. How do you want me to be around you? How would you feel? Are you okay if I kiss my other partner in front of you? Are you okay if I touch them? Is there a sign you can give me, a secret sign you can give me, and then I'll go and I'll like, what would you want? Would you want words of affirmation? Would you want me to touch you, to hug you, to kiss you?
And debrief afterwards.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, and then that's how
Yeah.
you're gonna like improve your script for next time until you have like a method that works well for your whole polycule.
Do you still get any anxiety around that? Because
Around
I'm
what
a
part?
very anxious person.
I get anxiety when all my partners are in the same room.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's what
That's
you
when
mean.
you're more in
like-
your head. Yeah.
Because in
I'm
my head, I'm like, are you
totally-
okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
It's I'm not even kind of enjoying wherever I am
That's our
because
problem.
my mind is just like, I just don't want to have a fight after this event.
Yeah. Or like, I don't want to go home and be like, the other person tell me like,
Yeah.
you didn't do this or
Yeah.
you missed that.
Yes.
Or, you know, I thought we were going to do that. Like, where
Right.
was your head? And I'm like, honestly, it was in outer space
Yeah.
because I was so anxious.
So when I talked a little bit about when you're learning a new skill, you know, it's like the training wheels are on.
True.
And you're going to think a lot because you don't have that muscle that's built yet. I can tell you after a while, it gets easier and easier and easier. And then it just becomes kind of just normal for you. It becomes like automatic for you. You're always going to start with the unconscious incompetent. That means you don't know you suck.
Yeah.
Okay?
Fair.
Okay. Then after that progresses to the conscious incompetent. You know you suck now. You're aware that you suck.
Yeah. And that sucks
Okay.
more.
Maybe. Okay. Then you want to improve. So then that progresses to the conscious competent. So now you're consciously, like you're putting all your mental energy into sucking less.
Gotcha.
So you're consciously competent. You're consciously doing the right thing, but it's taking a lot of brain energy.
Right.
And after a while, unconscious competent. You can do things back of your hand. you're not even thinking about it anymore. That's the progression of learning.
I think for us, one thing we figured out is being really gentle with the group hangouts too. I think before we were like trying to shove it together, we're like, this is going to be kitchen table polyamory. We're all going to feel really good and we're going to love each other. Everyone come hang out and sleep over. And it was just like, whoa. It's a little aggressive. Yeah. So we were like, hey, is everyone still feeling good tonight? Like maybe let's like hang out and then go to separate places after. Like it doesn't have to be a full sleepover. Right. You know, it's like start slower. We don't have to go full intensity right off the bat.
It's the way you never make, all your friends forcibly hang together.
Yeah.
Right? It's got to be an organic process. You can't force
think
friendship.
about that.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. Part of the learning process.
I think sometimes like when you're entering something brand new, you see like the things that you want to see, or you see like the sparkly bits, and you see something that looks like an ideal to you, and you're like, that's what I want. That's what we gotta have.
Yeah.
It's that or nothing. And you try to like force it in a place where it can't be forced. So yeah, definitely go slower for sure.
In your practice, are there any issues that you find come up a lot for specifically neurodivergent people?
Absolutely. You see in our coaching practice, different people, with different neurodivergences come and they have different challenges. So you can have somebody with autism who has more black and white thinking and needs more structure. We have clients with borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and they may struggle with things like emotional regulation, may struggle with boundaries, right? And then, so they're going to need a totally, different way of being able to approach polyamory, to be able to manage healthy polyamorous relationships.
Specifically with ADHD, and I feel like that's the most common, the major symptoms that I feel like is object impermanence, kind of like out of sight, out of mind. If I go see another partner, or if I'm with Millie, I will totally forget about my other partner. Like I won't message them or whatever because they're not around me and everything. And to my partner, she was kind of saying like, hey, I want to feel special. I want to feel like you're thinking about me and stuff like that. And I feel like you just don't care, or you just forget about me the moment you're with your other partner. Because when I was with her, I was fully present. I was there. I gave her all the attention, 100%. And then I forget about Millie, but Millie doesn't care. Like Millie's
good. No.
Millie's doing her own thing,
There are issues that happen, that people struggle with that are related to neurodivergence and polyamory, but there's also superpowers of that. A lot of people who are polyamory educators are autistic, right? And that's because I think I'm on the spectrum. Every time I test for it, it turns out that I'm not. I'm like, this doesn't sound right. There has to be, there's just so many things that I relate to.
You're like, but I feel,
and one of those things is I don't really follow social norms, like I look at that from a logical, I look at anything and I'm like, logically speaking, this is how I became polyamorous because I was like, okay, so hardly any animals are monogamous. None of the primates are monogamous. Divorce rate is 50%. Cheating is 60%. So monogamy was globalized by European colonization because I'm a nerd. And so
this was all in the womb also.
Exactly.
So I've been polyamorous since I was like, I had this thinking when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
I have crushes on different people. So clearly you can have emotions with different people. I think I don't want to do this monogamy thing. I don't have to, and because I was like the person who didn't follow social norms anyway. So I just was like, it doesn't make logical sense. I'm not doing it. What you going to do about it? Nothing. Okay. All the people I know who are naturally non-monogamous, who've never practiced monogamy, right, and never had a book tell them, they all follow a similar type of thinking. It was just logically did not make sense. They didn't do it, right? And a lot of them are autistic, and that's a superpower. And the same thing I think for people who have, ADHD, you're always thinking about different things, but you're able to juggle, quite a lot more. So you're better at juggling multiple relationships, for example. And then, with people with BPD or NPD, especially with NPD, they struggle with boundaries. So something that's a polyamory relationship structure that's very autonomous actually works great for them.
Yeah, I think that's cool, honestly, seeing it less like a disability, more like a superpower, and just finding what kind of lifestyle fits better for you. I have obviously very severe ADHD, as we've been talking about, and I think for so long trying to fit into this mold of society makes you feel like you are very disabled. Like you're like, I just can't do it. And then realizing you can start to build your own life, which we have been doing, I'm like, no, it is a superpower. Like there is so many things that I can do that other people can't do. And I'm glad that my brain works this way. I think so many of the things you were bringing up definitely are things that I experienced, like the impulsiveness right off the bat. I think that's definitely some of like my biggest regrets, but I also just like didn't realize that it was happening, is like not enough like checking in. I think you're not a huge communicator, and
Damn.
I'm a very impulsive
Call me
ADHD
out
person.
like that.
No, you have a hard time, like you already said yourself, you have a hard time communicating your own emotions.
Yeah.
And like it's like later it's happening, so she really needs someone to check in and like double check in, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, you haven't said anything, like full steam ahead. I'm so excited about this new thing that we're doing. Now that I've like acknowledged it, it's definitely something I'm like making myself practice to like really slow down and be a lot more mindful. And then interesting, like the object impermanence thing, for me, it kind of happened in a different way. I was finding that switching partners was really hard for me because I was like, oh, I just got used to this. It might also be like a bit of an on the spectrum thing. I'm also like considering if that's there for me in the same way. But it's that change between partners was like always very jarring for me. I've always found that to be a bit hard. I'm getting better at it, but
The things that you would experience that were like jarring for you or like deregulating for you were a shock to me, because I don't feel that whatsoever. And it seemed that always we had kind of like opposing things that would bother us. Like things that would bother you, I like didn't even think about as like a possibility that would bother me or that would bother you actually.
totally.
And then things that would bother me, you weren't considering.
One of the biggest things that I've taken away from this polyamorous experience is learning that you can't really make assumptions on how someone else is feeling or what's going on with them. Because I think that's something like an anxious mind does a lot, is like you're assuming based off of like how you would act, how another person is feeling. And
Yeah.
I think that relates to so many different relationships. Like I started applying it to my relationship with my parents too. And I'm like, it's okay. They have a different brain.
Yeah. You pointed out like the piece about communication for myself. And it also has to do with like being in consideration of like where somebody comes from or like their upbringing as well. Because for me, I think the lack of communication comes from kind of how I was raised, where I was very much that kid that was like, did as they were told for most of their life until I came out and started, you know, being queer and exploring like myself as me. I'm starting to realize now that even though I've explored queerness a lot, like I don't apply that exploration to very many other areas of my life. Like it's always a task to find myself further and learn more about myself outside of my upbringing and what I thought that I was supposed to do. Like I have been somebody traditionally who was very good at scripts. And to break outside of that and be like, let's write a script. I'm like, damn, I'm not a very good writer. Like, I don't know. Like,
You know, I'm a writer. I'm literally a professional writer.
okay, yeah, no, I'm a visual person. So,
And one of the best advice was by Ernest Hemingway. And he said, you know, you need to write less and live a life. And that's how you'll be a great writer. So if you're having a hard time figuring out your story, that means you need to live more. You need to just experience more, you know? If you were always following a script, you need to do things that are off script a little bit more. You know, go back, you know, you're already good at feeling, you know? You need to go out there and do things that are off script more.
That's good advice.
that's good advice.
This next question I'm actually really interested in. I have a lot of my own thoughts on it too, but this was an audience question. They're wondering, how do I ask my partner to invite me to family stuff? In brackets, his other partner already attends.
The same thing as we said earlier about your needs. You just say it. You just need to always express what you need to your partner. And I think you have a lot to say that.
I have a lot to say about this. Understandably, we're human and humans are going to human and we're more complex and it might be easier said than done. So, you know, a lot of times, and this is a trend we see, most of us really suck at knowing our needs, articulating our needs, and setting boundaries. Like those are kind of the trifecta of what we are not good at. And the needs bit, I mean, like it's understandable where that comes from. When we are young, super young as kids, and when we have needs, most of the time our parents ignore us because we're kids. Who cares what you want? You're just going to do what mom or dad says. Yes, we do have occasionally, there's exceptionally those parents that really sit down with us, that gentle parenting and everything, and want to hear. Most of the time it's like, what are you doing? Why are you crying? Come on, let's go do this, or shh, stop it. You know, and so what do we do as humans? What's our coping mechanism? Suppress. We feel like, you know what, our needs.
I feel like I'm acing this test.
You're getting a star. I wish I brought my stickers. We suppress and we feel, and our coping mechanism is like, I'm not going to express my needs, or that part of us doesn't get developed as well. And so we develop in other ways and stuff like that. And then we just don't listen to our body, our needs and stuff like that. And so as we grow up and become humans, adult humans, sorry. That's what I meant to say. In the script that we were talking about, there's this assumption that our partner should just know what we want. Our partner should just predict it. They should know. I don't need to say it.
Mind reader.
You know, let alone, I don't even know what I want, but they should know, you know.
That's me.
Yeah. You know, a lot of our calls is getting them to write down their needs. And if you don't know, sit with yourself, go in a room and write down what do you want. I would go deep into kind of figuring out, like, were they in a situation in the past, in previous relationships, or where every time they articulated their needs, they were ignored or they were always denied, which causes them maybe in this situation to be afraid to talk with their partner, because maybe that might be the case. If you're too scared to approach your partner off the fly or articulate this, write down, what do you want? And write it down in the perfect way. Writing it down alone allows you to amend and say the perfect things. Sometimes when we're saying it on the fly, it might not come out right, but when we can write it down and then schedule a date night with your partner, read whatever you wrote, and talk about what it means to you, why this is important. You know, that gives more context and meaning to your partner. I can almost guarantee that the reason why they probably want to be with their partner's parents is because they want to feel like they mean something, like it's a status thing for them. They don't want to feel dismissed. They want to feel seen by their partner. And if their metamour has gone, it might be this feeling of unfairness, that they're not being seen as much. They're being, you know, probably perceived as like this side piece or whatnot. And so really going into that.
It also might make somebody feel like they're not able to see this other part that's a very important part of their partner's life, you know, their family, the person that shaped them and gave birth to them. And the other thing is that, you know, and I know it's a hard question, but what if their partner is not out to their family?
That's what came up for me when I read the question too.
Yeah.
One thing, like being in a queer relationship, I've had to come to terms with, like, not everyone you date is going to be out just in terms of their sexuality to their partners. And I think being someone who dates in like queer dynamics, you get used to that, is like you kind of put meeting family on like a lower tier, I guess. And getting to meet their friends, for example, can give you that kind of satisfaction of like, I'm seen, like, you're not embarrassed of me. Like, that can be kind of a tier there. It's like, we're building a life together. Like, I'm still obviously important to you. I think from your perspective of like, if it's not a matter of coming out, I agree with everything. I think it's just, I would never expect anyone to come out. I just don't think it's fair to put someone through that turmoil if they're not ready to go through it personally.
So the question then I would ask a person then for that, you know, if you are the partner who's dating somebody who isn't out yet, how long would you be willing to wait for that? Would there want to be a process? So let's say you're together 10, 15 years, right? Are you willing to always be in the shadows? You know, because there's going to be a lot of important things that happen that you might miss.
Or are there other ways they can feel seen? Can they be around their friends?
In that note, like maybe they can't come out to a mother who might be polyphobic, but maybe they'll be a sister or a cousin that so they can tell them is like, I actually do want you to see my family. Can we see my sister?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right? You know, they'll be more accepting, and then we can work towards creating that space with my mother or my parents or whatever.
100%. I think when we first met, I really wanted to meet your family. And I think going through this podcast and having lots of different conversations with different queer people, we have like, I've come to the realization that like coming out, this idea of coming out is a very white idea. You know, a lot of people of color, queer people of color, don't ever come out to their family. And that's also something that I think if you are a white person who's like expecting someone to come out is realizing that that might not be the dynamic. Like we've been together for 6 years and I haven't met her family, and it used to be hard, but it isn't anymore. I think what we have done through that is like I've connected with your sister and we've like created our own traditions those ways, and like me like creating traditions with our friends and those kinds of things, and like creating your own chosen family dynamics. I think is really important. I think the hard part is, when you have that imbalance of one partner is already introduced to the family, because that can create like hierarchical dynamics. And then how do you navigate that if someone isn't comfortable coming out as polyamorous, but there is that element of, I guess, hierarchy?
Yeah, so we actually call that couple privilege versus hierarchy, because hierarchy is a choice to be hierarchical and enforce these, you know, sort of structures. But couple privilege is what society, it's like privilege, like any privilege, society gives to you whether you want it or not. And you can weaponize it. But in this case, it could be the fact that your family has chosen this is the person that is your legitimate partner, whether you like it or not. And we will, all this we'll consider like lovers or, you know, mistresses or whatever, right?
And then a non-intentional example would probably be, say you get an invite to a wedding. And just like the one partner that your parents or family is familiar with is the one who gets to go, and then your other partner doesn't. How do you deal with those kinds of situations? Because it is kind of sticky if someone isn't ready to come out, but you're feeling these uncomfortable feelings.
You have to have a plan, because it's intense couple privilege.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you rock, paper, scissors again? Or?
Not in that situation.
Not in that one. Not in that
Just
one.
wear a wig.
You know, so as an African, we don't tend to have any conversations around sex with our family. And coming out as maybe sometimes polyamorous or queer is basically for a lot of people, you're talking about sex directly. What I recommend more for people from communities where, you know, there is a certain like conversations I just not had is try to come in more. Have different conversations around your family. For me, as a Kenyan, it's been talking to my mother about what was life like before the British came? Well, how did we live? Grandfather did not have just one wife. 2 of my aunts are married to themselves, right? So it's having these conversations about who brought to us monogamy.
I always think, when I think of Colombia, about how unfortunate and sad it is that the Spanish, they came in and like force-fed all of these ideals and values down our throats, and then left us with like those values that are so deeply indoctrinated and ingrained that it seems nearly impossible to like get rid of. Whenever I think about like racism in Colombia, whenever I think of religion in Colombia, whenever I think of even like classism or like whatever else, or homophobia, I'm like, wow, how unfortunate that we still follow all of this indoctrination that was fed to us, that we were supposedly liberated from, which in the end we were not.
On the same vein, there's another audience question. What is your advice for dating someone who already has an established long-term partner?
We've definitely experienced this on the other end. We've been together for 14 years. So I can completely understand that, you know, to any new partners that any of us would have, it would be very intimidating for them to enter kind of like a relationship with any of us, knowing that their metamour has been together for 14 years. I know Millie talked a little bit about the relationship escalator. A lot of times it's kind of, we see the length of a relationship as more valuable, more important. So it's about really breaking kind of like these assumptions, all because I've been with somebody for 15 years. I could have been with somebody and had a miserable relationship with them for 15 years. Doesn't mean it's any more or less valuable or anything. Not to say that it's been miserable with Millie, but the discussions we get into, there's a lot of deep-seated insecurities because we have this assumption that in monogamy, if I'm dating somebody even just a year, I know that I'm supposed to be their everything, right? And so they're going to come to me for everything. But if I had a partner who I've been with for longer and I know, like, they know me better, they can provide better advice, a sounding board or everything, I'm going to go to them. And so it's kind of screwing with one's head because it's like, what the heck, like, why aren't you coming to me? I don't feel important. And so really it's this awareness that trust, intimacy takes a lot of time. But after a while, after a certain number of years, I feel like after 5 years, things level off. So a 15-year relationship and a 1-year relationship, there's mass amount of difference in terms of intimacy, in terms of the other person knowing you, in terms of trust and everything. After 2-3 years, that gap slowly, but I feel like after 5 years, the level of trust and intimacy is comparable no matter how. I could have a 25-year relationship, 5-year, I feel it's comparable. And it's just understanding that the arc of a relationship, like, that happens and there needs to be some establishment of trust and everything. And so it's just, it's like we get into this danger zone when we're comparing. And we usually say comparison is the thief of joy. And so it's really about focusing on the development of your relationship. And it's about perspectives, because if I'm the new partner, I'm going to look at the other partner and be like, oh, my partner's so much closer to them and everything. But to the older partner, they might see, oh, why do they get to do all the fun stuff? And they're so
Spicy,
passionate
yeah.
and they're so passionate. So, I mean, there's pros and cons with new relationship energy and old relationship energy. And we always want what we don't have all the time. And so
that's such a good point that I think that whether you're the new partner or the old partner, like, you don't really consider a lot of the time. Well, maybe now with practice you do. But in terms of being the person, the hinge who's managing all of that, how do you personally do it, or how would you advise?
Oh, it was a learning curve for me. I can tell you, like, how I screwed up. We talked about ADHD, where it's like the energy's changing and you got to, like, almost code switch. I didn't have that skill. So I would come out of this deep connection, love with Millie. And then I would go to this other person, like we were on the second or third date, and I'd have this deep level and they'd be like, whoa, this is freaking intense. What are you doing? We're just on the second date, dude.
You're like, sorry, this is actually all I know.
I had to calibrate and be like, okay, like, how I behave with Millie, who I've been with for so long, I need to let that go and be different with this partner. This person barely knows me. I don't want to scare the heck out of them, I was treating them as if they were my partner for 10 years. And so...
What were you doing?
You don't want to know. But that's what I learned as the hinge, to kind of recognize that every relationship is different and has a different path, and to kind of recognize that and to, compartmentalize. That's the word of the day, I feel, for the hinge, is to really understand that these are different people, different dynamic, different relationship.
Different needs. So we got this last question a lot. It's another audience question. What are some healthy ways to handle conflict within your polycule that you're not directly associated with, i.e. your partner and your meta are fighting, or there's tension between your two partners?
So
There's a lot of laughter going on over there.
all right, so
More mistakes that I did, but go on.
so going back to the last thing Nick said.
But before we get into that, this podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer. And with Vizzy's vibrant flavors, you can now follow your own vibe.
For those of you who know Queer Collective, you know that Vizzy has been a longtime supporter of us in our mission to create accurate and positive representation for the entire queer community. So if you are a hard seltzer drinker, we highly recommend drinking and supporting one that you know also supports the queer community.
And now, back to the episode.
Recognize that there's a relationship that you have with your partner, then your partner has a relationship with your metamour. And try not to like over involve yourself with a relationship with your partner and your metamour. So for example, with Nick, we've been together 14 years. I know I have a lot of couple privilege. So I know if I say something, how much weight it has, right? So I try to avoid ever weaponizing that, even saying something even in the slightest. I try to
Like
be...
what kinds of things? Do you have an example?
If he has a conflict or anything, I might actually be like, maybe talk to that with a friend.
Interesting.
You know, just because I don't want to color my feelings around this, or I may just be like, what are your thoughts? I'm not going to try to suggest anything specifically because I'm his partner.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you have a hard time being like a neutral?
Not at all.
Yeah.
He knows this. I'm neutral to a fault. I'm like ethically principled to a fault where he'll be like, can you please just tell me the answer to this? What should I do? And I'll be like, nope.
Yeah.
I think we've both become neutral because I know like Millie has asked me for advice many times about, and I've been like, nope, I'm not getting into this.
Yeah. Your opinion holds weight, and if they do something
100%.
and then they don't like it, they'll resent you for it. Your meta will resent you. It's going to be a hot mess. Just be like, it's their journey. They've got to figure it out. La, 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 la. Sometimes I'll be like, no, not even listening to it. You know, like, I'm sorry. You're going to have to do it over there. You know, I'm putting a boundary around this. So that's one way. Now, if your partners don't get along, I think that is something that it's very hard for a hinge when your partners don't get along.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Growing up, though, in Kenya, where polygamy is very common, especially in my Maasai tribe, I saw there was most Maasai practice polygamy. So all my neighbors had 2-3 wives, right? And the wives had boyfriends. And you would see like co-wives, for example. You know, it's very common to know that these wives don't get along. But there was just this way of knowing that they don't get along fine, you know, they're going to be cordial though with each other and they're not just going to spend time around each other. And that's it. There's nothing else. There's no like drama, no messiness, no fighting, you know. And then we come to polyamory in Western culture where, you know, kitchen table polyamory is something that, you know, the ideal for a lot of people. But I've always been like, just be a little bit more realistic and also like, have knowledge that humans are humans, conflict might happen, this dream might not happen. You know, your partner's not getting along, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. As long as you're all cordial and have boundaries, it's fine. If it's really such a strain, you can work through a mediator. Sometimes the hinge cannot be that person because, you know, it's a conflict of interest. So hiring, you know, somebody like a coach.
Or they.
What did I say?
He.
Oh, damn it. Sorry. This is when mononormative, like heteronormative thinking is internalized, and even I'm decolonizing. Sorry.
Or you're just thinking of your own situation.
Yeah.
I think it's because I've never had my partners ever conflict. But yeah.
So
Saucy.
this is a good segue.
Okay.
I'd like to say that most of the time, it's the hinge's fault. It's because they're not hinging properly.
Yeah.
So I can give examples of what hinges do that are not right, that causes conflict. One of them is don't vent about your other partner to your other partner, because whatever you say that colors the perception, and they're just hearing one side.
Yeah.
And they're going to be biased because they love you and they're not in a relationship with their other partner and stuff like that. So it creates conflict. So if you want to vent, if you're upset at one of your partners or anything, don't use your other partner as a sounding board. Talk to a friend, talk to somebody else. The other thing, and this is like almost crucial, it's hinges that don't know what they want. And so what happens when hinges don't do what they want? They're going to constantly be at the mercy of the whims of each partner. And so they're going to do to please one partner, and then that might upset the other partner, and then they're gonna try to fix it by going to please the other partner, and then that upsets the other partner, and then they're gonna go and please the other one, and then they're gonna be constantly in this kind of like back and forth swing of things.
Why are you calling me out like that?
Yeah, and you feel like you can never win, like you're never good enough.
Right. Before trying to please your partners, because we know that also comes from maybe some baggage, some trauma, that, people-pleasing tendencies. It could be anxious attachment, that we want to fix things right away and everything. Sit with that uncomfortableness. Figure out what you want, what grounds you, what are your values, how do you want to structure things, and then take the lead. Tell your partners, this is what's going to happen. I'm making the decision. It's an easier pill to swallow for a partner to hear, this is how I want to do things and I'm making this decision, versus this is what I want to do because my other partner is upset.
Yeah, and I think that also pins the two metas against each other, being like, well, this is what the other partner wants. Like, I have to go do this.
Yeah.
And that makes it feel like that other person is kind of taking away something from you. Whereas stating your boundaries and saying, this is what I want, and taking accountability for it, it puts the conflict between the two of you.
Yeah.
And
a limiting belief to like debunk a little bit in our heads is oftentimes we think if our partner is upset that we're the ones hurting them. Mm-hmm. And this is what I mean, sit with the discomfort of your partners not being happy. It's not always that you're the one hurting them. And to just explore that uncomfortable feeling and trying to figure out, kind of like support your partner. A lot of times it's your partner kind of like dealing with these feelings, and it's that communication piece and trying to find the root cause and everything.
And I mean, just holding space, I think, for someone's feelings rather than taking it on, I think can do a lot.
Bingo.
One thing I do want to say is like a resolution that we found, of course, like we mentioned, Carbon is struggling with CPTSD, which makes it hard to be a good hinge when like you're really challenged. And I sorry, that sounded kind of fucking mean.
I'm so
when
challenged.
you're so deeply challenged. I just mean as like
and bad at communication and doesn't know what she wants.
Sorry. No, I mean, if one of your partners is struggling and you want to be supportive, I think between the two metas, what we decided to do is like start communicating with each other. And it felt awkward at first, but I think like we realized that we weren't actually on totally different pages, the two of us. It's like there was just a communication breakdown happening in the middle.
I'm just a baby.
You're just a baby. And you're working through your stuff though, and it's really heavy.
Yeah.
And I think as partners, you can be supportive of someone's journey and understanding of the different things that like someone has been through in their life and the different journey that you're on, and be supportive in different ways that people need.
Like polyamory allows you to explore different facets of your personality, and you can realize that with other people as well, that you wouldn't have otherwise realized with this one partner. And I think that's the beauty about uncovering different things, uncovering different insecurities, about knowing yourself. If we learn so much and grow in one relationship, polyamory is growing and learning about yourself on steroids. I began a healing process with those insecurities that I would have probably otherwise not have experienced had I been in a monogamous relationship all these years.
I feel very similarly. I found things about myself that have definitely made me feel more me throughout this process. And I'm like, wow, I never would have turned this rock over otherwise. And despite all of like the inner turmoil that we've gone through, it's definitely been like a very challenging year. Once you turn the rock over, you can't put it back, I guess, It's like you can't unlearn about yourself.
When me and Nick and his other partner, we were not getting along, we were like, who do we seek for advice when we are the polyamory experts?
Yeah.
One of those people is actually one of my exes. And he is a person who's also always been polyamorous. He's been with one of his partners for since they were 15 years old, and he's in his 30s now. He usually has about 4 partners at a time, and everything. And his other partner he's been with for 7 years.
Expert
right?
mode.
And he's got a kid and everything.
Yeah. More than 2?
More than 2. He's got 4 partners. He's got a kid. He's got a wife.
Yeah.
My best boyfriend ex ever. And then the other person is another friend of mine who is a therapist, who has also always been polyamorous, had the most partners I've ever seen anyone have at the same time. And I was like,
7 or 8.
he had like 7 or 8 partners at the same time, and he was living with 2 of them. And then I have another friend who is also a polyamorous therapist. Whenever we have issues, right, we're going to call the Polyamory Council. So I was like, we're going to convene the Polyamory Council for this because I have my theorization about how to solve this. Yeah. And so we went together and we laid it out, and the Polyamory Council gave the advice.
When you're in your thoughts and stuff like that, you learn a lot from just like talking it out with somebody that can relate and that's been through things themselves and everything.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why our peer sessions are so popular. A lot of people say like they haven't got nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
And so, it's when you talk things out and everything, like that's how a lot of people learn as well.
These are the things that help us learn is community. So, and the more you're in polyamory community, the more that you'll get that skill sets and so know what to do. And so for us, it's been important even for us, polyamory community.
It's a good point. And even something you were saying earlier, Nick, is like different partners are going to unlock different parts of your personality. And I think that also means that people aren't always going to vibe necessarily, because if that is unlocking a different part of you, it might not necessarily be something that you share with your other partner. And then these two people, it's like sometimes it can be like, what do you see in that person? It's so confusing, but you just have a different lens. They're unlocking something different from you. And I think always respecting the other connections that somebody has and like seeing it as separate from you. You don't necessarily have to form a relationship with that person. It can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, and this also goes back to like having a compersion mindset, having a positive empathy mindset where you want, this, you may not understand, this person, you don't like, attract to them in the same way, but they're giving your partner something, and just being happy that your partner is getting something from them with, whatever that is, and be like, I'm happy for you.
The one interesting thing is we've always been each other's soundboards with our other relationships. Is
also,
that like
we're nosy.
The thing is, I feel like we know each other the best, and sometimes we help each other, like we call each other out, and a lot of the times I find like she'll kind of be on my other partner's side, I'll be on my other partner's side, and we kind of are like, well, you do this a lot, and but like, do you think maybe you're doing this pattern again? And I find that has helped for us. Is it inherently a bad thing to share?
No, if it works for your dynamic, then that's great. We've just noticed that when it didn't work, that was the culprit a lot of times. You know, so
I think you can have boundaries even around that, because we definitely talk about like and advise each other and call each other shit out all the time, around relationships.
Yeah, I think it depends though.
Yeah,
we
a
have
line.
a certain line that we've established, and do our other partners know that we're talking about this too? How would they feel and everything? And so kind of like it's figuring out where this is where kind of like a polycule agreement or something might come in handy, where it's like, what can we share? What is useful to us to share?
The next section that we want to move on to is the BIPOC non-monogamous experience, which I don't think is talked about nearly enough. So our first question for you is, how does the intersection of race and cultural identity shape the experiences of non-monogamous BIPOC folks?
I think our non-monogamy journey, histories, and how we experience non-monogamy differs quite a lot. So I started being a polyamory activist because I first created a group called Toronto Non-Monogamous BIPOC in 2017. And the reason I started it is because I went to a polyamory meetup in Toronto, which was so white. And it had about maybe 2,000 people in the group and 11 people of color, which for Toronto is like a really ridiculous ratio.
Yeah.
And so when I asked the organizers, where are all the other people of color? They were like, well, people of color are kind of conservative. And I was like, that's not my experience. So I decided to do a meetup with the 11 people just to ask them what's going on. And because of the way Facebook event settings were at that time, you can't do, you can't invite people to an event if they're not friends of yours. So I had to put it public. And that event went viral. And then rather than 11 people, 200 people messaged me, and then 150 people showed up.
Wow.
150 people of color. I was like, whoa, okay, so there's more than 11. What do we do with this momentum now?
Yeah.
Right? And that's how I started polyamory organizing, by organizing meetups for non-monogamous people of color specifically. And then people started asking me to do workshops. So I was like, I want every person of color to go back home, talk to your grandparents, tell me about what love was in your community prior to colonization. Tell me what changed, right? Bring back your best practices. Teach me. Let's decolonize love together as a community. That workshop sold out. It was super packed. It was so beautiful. It's always ironic to me when people think like people of color aren't non-monogamous when we've been holding it and keeping it within our cultures this entire time, you know, but just shamed for it. So in my culture, traditionally, you had polygamy, you had female husbands, which is queer-coded. Women could marry other women, but they could also be married to a man and marry another woman. You had self-marriage, which I still don't see anywhere else, right? We still live in this idea that you have to have be a romantic, partner, but what about if you are aromantic, asexual, and you don't want to ever be partnered, Soul amory is not something that's talked about, but we have self-marriage. It believes in your self-actualization. You go out, you tell, figure out who you are, come back to the tribe, tell us who you are, and we'll celebrate you. You move to the West, there's a lot of shaming. A lot of people, they're trying to assimilate, they're trying to fit in. Monogamy and marriage culture has been sort of the ways that people get security within this culture, where you show respectability. The ways people of color sexuality is racialized is this thing that's out of bound, out of control. So people show that the fact that no, they're just as human as white people is sometimes through marriage, through respectability politics, through the nuclear family. And then there's also the way the state particularly polices people of color sexuality. And you see that in the way, for example, if you are polyamorous, is that you may be considered like a danger to your children, and then child services is taken and it comes in, right? Why there's so many men inside your house? This is dangerous, sin. So you will find yourself having to perform monogamous culture because of safety. We would have people from social housing who would come in, who can't be out, who have certain concerns about that, because social housing can be taken from you if you have multiple boyfriends or girlfriends.
Really?
Yes. Oh. And, people of color are more likely to be in these margins, right? So these are all the intersections that I think as people of color who are practicing non-monogamy have to face.
It definitely wasn't even like the answer I was expecting to. I just learned a lot, so thank you. Both of you get a lot of comments on your posts about your interracial relationship, which I'm like, what decade are we in? But I'm wondering what your takeaways have been from being in an interracial poly dynamic.
I'm going to start this being an interracial dynamic before I add the polyamory dynamic part to it. So I'm mixed Kenyan, and growing up right after colonization was difficult for both my parents and for me. So my Italian grandfather did come to Africa as a colonizer with part of Mussolini's army to colonize Somalia, and then got arrested by the British, came to Kenya, and then realized colonialism was wrong. And he ended up marrying my grandmother, got disowned by his entire family, and then he spent his time using his white privilege to smuggle weapons to the Kenyan freedom fighters. My family had to go through a lot of discrimination because all the people saw, they didn't know my grandfather and that side of him, and the fact that he got disowned and he, almost died trying to smuggle weapons so Black people could get their freedom too, and trying to rewrite his ways. What they saw was my Black grandmother was with the colonizer. And my dad, for example, was not allowed to go to hospital sometimes. They would deny him care and everything. There was a lot of discrimination in the tribe. My parents split up, married my stepfather, who's Dutch. And once again, there's the same thing, you're marrying the colonizer. So I became very, wary of that, because I was like, yeah, they are the colonizers, but I also believe it's how you use your privilege. That's what I'm most concerned about. Everybody carries privilege, but how are you using it once you got it? That to me shows a character. But I'm also very aware of the fact of how it reads for other people, what I trigger by dating a white man. I got to create space for my own wounded, my own traumas, my own intergenerational issues around interracial dynamics. Plus, I have to learn how to hold space for their own wounded. So we have a whole bunch. Because for me, sometimes I get very defensive because of what happened to my family. And I always tell people is that don't we want white people to be taking on the mantle of decolonization? You know, I think we should be sitting back and letting them do the work of decolonization.
Yeah.
Personally, yes, we should have more white people decolonizing. It's a great thing. The hardest is when it's in a polyamory dynamic. When I have partners who are people of color and they are getting very triggered by seeing me with a white cishet man. I had a black partner, and he would bring it up all the time. You're already having to be triggered around jealousy, but then there is the, you know, the feelings of all, you know, we have our couple privilege, but our couple privilege, you know, when, you know, your partner has this white, you know, privilege too,
by proxy.
right? By proxy.
Yeah.
And this is something that happens in polycules all the time, where there's sometimes, you know, people of color or even white partners might privilege their white partners inadvertently, or sometimes even, you know, knowingly, right? And how that impacts polyamory and polycule trauma. So it's about holding space and having those hard conversations and just being like, I'm not with him because of his white privilege or whatever. The way this man loves me, you know, the way that he cares for me. What are we going to center here? Are we going to center love? Or are we going to actually, by thinking about being with somebody just based on race, right? I think in that way, kind of like you're affirming some types of racism because you're not going beyond skin deep. And isn't kind of like that's what, you know, internalized racism is? And I think we should center love and the human. And so,
Yeah, it's hard getting it from strangers, but it's even harder getting it from someone who you're also in a relationship with, because I think with strangers, you can push it off. Like, that's your trauma. It's not my burden to carry that. But when it's a partner and it's someone you really care about, it's hard to hurt that person, but also like hold your own boundaries of like, there's nothing wrong with this. Like, yeah, that is still your burden, but I want to help you with it. So how did you navigate that?
When you have a person who's got trauma who may not really understand their emotions very well, and then trying to put words on their emotions, you know, and be like, is this because of this? What comes up for you when you see me with him? You know, how would it be different if I was dating another Black person or person of color? Would it be any different? In what ways? What does it make you feel? And you know, some of the things that he was making him feel was feeling emasculated because of so much of the way racism works towards men of color is that emasculates them, not being able to protect a woman, you know, or a woman-coded person. You know, and so he was feeling emasculated quite a bit. He also was feeling, because he earned less than Nick, he was like, oh, you're with a rich white man, which I get a lot all the time, you know, and I'm like, I pay my own stuff. I'm here for the person, but, you know, these narratives, you know, unpacking them, and then he cheated on me with a white woman.
Oh no, the hypocrisy. I'm just doing it for the cottage.
I don't even have a
I know, I'm
cottage.
kidding.
So from my perspective, like obviously, yes, I'm a white cishet man. So yeah. And yes, there's a lot of privilege. And I feel with privilege comes blindness. You're blind to so many things. You go through your whole life. Now, in order to get rid of this blindness or to be aware of things, you know, empathy goes a long way. How do you empathize? You can educate yourself. A lot of us, we empathize with having friends that have different lived experiences from ours. That helps a lot. What's even more intense about learning about somebody's lived experiences is actually being in a relationship with them. I remember this one summer, Millie would come home every day, and there would be a few days she'd be crying because she'd be catcalled on the streets a lot. And I obviously have never experienced that, but hearing from her lived experiences like that made me much more aware. And it's like once you're aware of all these things, you can't unsee them anymore. Like the way she experiences institutional racism, the way she's experienced microaggressions, and hearing her lived experience, her perspective, and hearing how it affects her. Again, that just made me so much more aware of things, and it removed kind of that blindness I was going through this world and everything. And so I think those conversations have made me a better partner, and even more than a better partner, just a better activist. as I go through the world, because now like I truly thoroughly understand the most I could possibly understand without going through it myself and having that lived experience. So
I think sometimes you can be in your white person bubble and have all of these like white people friends, especially if you grew up in like a very white city.
Yeah.
I think a good place to start is listening to these experiences online, reading books, and educating yourself that way, because now when you're meeting people, you're not being weird and I don't know, just like off-putting with like just like certain microaggressions and things that you are not even realizing. It's like educate yourself first and then go and make these friends so that you know how to be a good friend to somebody.
How does polyamory intersect with decolonization?
Quite a bit. Prior to European colonization, 3/4 of world societies practice some form of non-monogamy. And then with the European colonizations, they globalized their value system, their patriarchal Christian value system, which privileged monogamy. And in some places, they created outright bans on non-monogamy. So the way that also Canada, the Settler Colonial Project was created was by how land was divvied and how land was also taken was so much based on monogamy.
Land ownership.
Land ownership. First of all, land was privatized. And, in a lot of indigenous cultures, the land was communally owned and it was given based on need. And things like water was not owned. Those are all communal things, right? And then Europeans brought in privatization, and if you want to have this land, you had to pay taxes, or you had to buy this land. Only men could buy the land. Now women's security and queer people were completely outright banned. Everybody had to be in a heteronormative relationship. And that's the only way that you could get inheritance security was through marriage. And the only people that could give you a marriage license had to be the church. So this is where you're institutionalized in Christianity, you're institutionalized in marriage, you're institutionalized heteronormativity and capitalism in the land, right? And monogamy. And that is how we get a compulsory monogamy culture. So polyamory questions all these things. It questions the fact that monogamy is the only right, respectable way to do things. It brings back this idea of like fluidity and questions things like scarcity. Right, and scarcity is so important for capitalism to operate.
Oh, yeah.
Polyamory is an inroad to all these conversations about how did we get here? What is right and wrong? Who taught us these things? And for what reason?
Yeah. Capitalism has this very unique and evil way of making the people who believe in it chase it, thinking that one day they will be one of its successors, whereas the reality is that majority of people are not. Majority of people are the cogs in the wheel. Majority of people actually get fucked over by capitalism. But the belief in you can be one of the few, one of the 1% that can make it out keeps people going. And somehow that's enough. It makes you feel and believe that that's what you want. So to deconstruct it is very difficult.
I think part of it too is it's so much harder, like we were saying, to create your own script.
Yeah.
Well, it seems harder, right? It seems so much harder to rewrite your own script and take your own path than to just do all of the things that they're telling you to do, follow the script, and supposedly everything's going to work out for you. That feels easier than fully deconstructing a whole massive system that feels so much bigger than all of us.
Yeah. What I love about decolonizing is, being able to look back into our cultures and being able to like revive them and bring some of these best practices back, because these models our ancestors gave us. They gave us the blueprints, actually. They gave us all these various scripts. They did all the like different experimentations about the best practices to love and to be in community and everything, right? It's there if we look.
You'd think that by now we're like super used to just writing our own script, but every single time that you try to write a new script in a new area, It's so difficult, and
scary.
it's still so scary, and it's
Yeah.
continuously scary. And you know, obviously, a lot of people don't want to live in the fear of the unknown. They'd rather live in the shit.
You know, I think part of having a growth mindset is accepting change, you know, being into change as part of like your philosophy. You know, how Buddhists, you know, believe is that what is suffering? Suffering is attachment. And you're attached to, you know, believing that there isn't such a thing as security, you know, and maybe, you know, detaching from that and accepting the world is change. Change is basically the only sort of constant as being of life.
When I first met Carbon, I had very little tolerance to change. Like Taurus, Virgo energy, like it needed to be the same and very stable. And you brought a totally different energy for me. But realizing that that was a growth mindset also, it's like learning how to be comfortable with change. And I've realized so much good has come from that, even though it's been very uncomfortable. But I do feel like that even like brought us back to our first question too. It's like, how do you get comfortable with change? And it is just, it's learning to let go. I think it's a lot of mindfulness too. And, and instead of like approaching life with like your fists clenched on it and like trying to control it, it's like opening your palm to like what could come and like realizing that there's a lot of beauty in that. How do we think polyamory challenges patriarchal norms? And I'm going to toss this one over to Nick.
Yeah, no worries. I think Millie set this up really well about how compulsory monogamy culture had been shaped and everything. You know, it's like one of the things about that is the nuclear family, where, you know, patriarchy in the nuclear family structure has the man at the top, the head of the household, and then everybody must follow. The man owns the land, the man is the provider. Polyamory, in essence, you know, gets rid of these hierarchical structures, gets rid of the nuclear family, gets rid of, it questions these norms. It's this hierarchical structure of the nuclear family. The other thing is gender norms. If one man in a heterosexual polyamorous dynamic provided for all of his partners, that would have to be a very rich man, you know? It just blows this up, these gender norms. Men are forced in these contexts because jealousy arises. We're forced to talk about our emotions.
Oh, no.
Patriarchy doesn't allow for that. You know, it's like we're supposed to suppress our emotions. We're only allowed to express anger and happiness. Those are the only ones. Anything else is considered the feminine. You know, with these new skills in articulating our emotions, articulating our needs, this kind of challenges patriarchal norms. The last thing I want to talk about is consent. You know, a lot of patriarchal norms, it's like, you know, we see all these older rom-coms where it's like the man steals a kiss, the man throws himself to the woman doesn't have a say or anything. And polyamory is so much axed on consent and giving non-men agency. A voice and autonomy.
For me, I saw starting polyamory as like us taking ourselves to like this next level of queerness as well, if that makes sense, where I'm like, this is like the final way I can queer my life. Like I've queered my gender, I've queered my sexuality, we've queered so many elements of our life, but this was kind of like that final pinnacle of like
our business is queer.
You have like deconstructing the one of maybe there's going to be another way I'm going to figure out, but like
We don't know
one
yet.
of the last ways that I felt like social systems were really controlling my life. And I don't know. I think I've felt like polyamory is inherently queer, but I don't necessarily think that every polyamorous practicing it is queer.
So let's ask the question, you know, Queer Collective, what does queer mean to you?
To me, queer goes outside of gender and sexuality. Yes, I can include that for sure. And I know that a lot of people in the LGBT plus spectrum claim the word queer as part of their identity. But it doesn't just mean that you are gay or that you're a lesbian or that you're bisexual, etc. I think it's anything outside of our normative societal structures.
Yeah, absolutely
So-
makes sense to me because like my definition of queer is quite similar to yours, where, you know, you could be LGBTQIA+, and to me not inherently be queer, because that is the current, you know, understanding of what queer, at least for colloquially, means. But I love, my favorite definition of queer is from Queer Nation back in the 80s and the 90s, where it's intentionally anti-assimilationist. You know?
Yeah.
Keyword intention.
Intentionally. It's intentionally radical, right? So you like, I remember seeing this TikTok of this Palestinian guy, and he was talking about there's some people who are telling him that if he was in Gaza, you know, that his people wouldn't accept exactly.
Right.
And he's like, who are you to tell me how my people, my family are and everything? You're gay, but you're not queer.
I think it's because they're lacking that intention. They think having this identity marker makes you queer. And I think it's the same thing where the same way I would say that just being polyamorous doesn't make you queer. I think just being gay doesn't make you queer either. It's like, are you fighting for the liberation of all people?
Exactly.
You know? And one thing people get really angry about is they're like, isn't queerness supposed to be all about inclusivity and love and acceptance? And like, you're othering people. You're doing like the same thing as people on the right are trying to do. You're trying to divide us. I feel like the sentiment of you're not being inclusive, I think it comes from like a big place of privilege, to be honest. You're not right.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think people are being very Elon Musk about it, you know, because they're basically like, I don't want to be held accountable. I want to be able to have speech and be a shitty person. And this is a reason why I'm doing this whole victim mentality and feeling like I'm excluded, even though I have all this amount of privilege, you know, and I could just change.
I want to have the right. I want to have the right to exclude someone else is what it is, because what we're saying queerness is basically fighting for everyone's rights and fighting for like
Liberation of all.
liberation of all. And if you're saying, oh, well, I'm not included in that, it's like, maybe question why you feel not included in that. If the queer community is all about inclusion, shouldn't everyone have a seat at the table?
So thank you both so much for being here. And for our listeners at home, where can people find you?
You can find Decolonizing Love on all major social media platforms. We are on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. And if you want to look at our political views, you can go to either Blue Sky or www.decolonizing.love.
And I just want to add on decolonizing.love, we talked about how boundaries, needs are super important, agreements and everything. We do have a relationship agreement generator where people can go fill out 80 to 100 questions with their partner. And they can do it again with another partner and do it again with another partner. And really it's multiple choice and free text. And then what happens after you answer all those questions is you get in your inbox a developed relationship agreement for you and your partner.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
You try it out.
into
And
that.
people they got a little taste of your sessions. How can they sign up?
Everything's on our website. Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you want to dive deeper into the history of polyamory, we have a whole episode on it. It's called Polyamory, the History You Never Thought to Ask. Make sure to subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure to leave us a 5-star review because it really does help the podcast out. That's everything that we got. And until next time, peace.